Alaskans, wherever you are, welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska. Where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Welcome, everybody, to the Must Read Alaska Show. I'm your host, John Quick, coming to you live from somewhere in Alaska. Hope everybody is having a phenomenal fall day here in Alaska. Man, the sun is shining where I'm at, which is pretty awesome. If you want to help sponsor the Must Read Alaska Show, which we'd love you to do, just email me, John, J-O-H-N, at mustreadalaska.com, or you can go to mustreadalaska.com. On the right-hand side, there's a little donate button. Every $5, $10, $100 helps keep the lights on here at Must Read Alaska. Today, we have a very special guest, somebody who's a returning guest, somebody who Must Read Alaska really likes. Kelly Tshibaka, welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, John.
Well, this will be fun. It'll be fun. We'll probably cover a couple of different topics. But one of the things that you do now is you are a representative of the Trump campaign for Alaska. So talk to me a little bit about that and how it's going as the Trump person for Alaska.
It's a real honor to get to chair Trump's campaign here in the state. I'm really excited that we were just successful in getting President Trump to reverse his non-endorsement of Nick Begich and come around and endorse him. This is the first time he's endorsed him. He's done 3 endorsements for this congressional race before. We had Sarah Palin. Well, I guess this is the third. Sarah Palin originally, and then Nancy Dahlstrom, and now finally for Nick Begich. So that's huge because I'm confident that President Trump will win the state of Alaska. What we're really doing right now is pushing and encouraging voter turnout. I'm very concerned that we will have low voter turnout. We had extremely low voter turnout from people who are to the right of center. So everyone who's undeclared or independent but tends to vote Republican, to people who are registered Republicans for our primary race, so much so that our Democrat candidates really overperformed. And of course, that presents some real challenges. I don't think for President Trump, but it does for our congressional ballot, which is Mary Peltola versus Nick Begich. And then, of course, down ballot, when our Juneau seats are very, very crucial this particular election cycle, we have an opportunity to start turning Alaska red again. And we have several seats that I would say Republicans across the state are looking to hold or to flip that are game changers in Juneau. And a large turnout for President Trump would be really key to making sure that we win those down ballot races. But I'll tell you, John, I'm very concerned that people will just say, well, President Trump has it in the bag. I have other things to do. I'm not going to vote. And that is an absolute definite way to maintain Alaska being blue. The Democrats are already sending out emails saying, keep Alaska blue. They recognize that we have turned into a Democrat state. I think that the people listening to your show would be silly to think that that hasn't happened. And it's going to be up to us to turn out in record numbers this fall in order to make our voices heard, to vote for President Trump, and then to vote down ballot Republican will make an absolute difference in the state this year.
Yeah, we see just crazy things happening on the news. Trump has had 2 assassination attempts now. What's it like being, on Trump's team and seeing the former president go through that twice now in the last 2 months? It's got to be pretty daunting to sit back and watch that.
I think it is for all of us who support him. I know him personally, and I feel very concerned for him and his family and how they must feel. A lot of people see him as a public figure, but he is a person and a husband and a dad and a friend. He's a brother. And so for all of the people in his close circle, it's absolutely devastating and tragic to know that your dad and your husband are out there every day and people are literally taking shots at him. I suspect that these are just the public attempts that we know about. There are, of course, many threats against him on a regular basis. And so he's putting his life on the line in an effort to make America great again. I think it's interesting that the campaign that we hear from Trump and Trump supporters is we really want to see the quality of life, national security, the border, et cetera, improve for America. We want America to be great. But all I'm hearing from the other side is we don't want Trump. which doesn't really have any kind of lasting power beyond January of 2025. If you win the election and you get what you wanted for, well, really since 2016, or when they started their attacks against him in 2015, then what was it all for? What are you going to do then? Kamala's been in office with Biden for the last 4 years, and we haven't seen any results of all these things she claims she's going to do. It's ridiculous to think that Biden had any cognitive ability then that he doesn't have now. So we all know who's really been running the show. So she's not going to do anything in the next 4 years that she hasn't had opportunity to do the last 4 years. But all we keep seeing and hearing is get Trump. And so then what does that mean for the rest of us working Alaskans, us parents who are trying to raise our kids, those of us who are looking for a better future? What does it mean for us? It's really, that's the choice between the two candidates. And I think we need to be recognizing the humanity of President Trump and realizing there's a lot on the line between two administrations really zealously advocating two very different positions. One who's just vengefully pursuing a person, and the other that is passionately pursuing a better country for tomorrow.
Yeah, and it seems to me like there's also another key distinction between Trump and the Kamala Harris or Joe Biden's administration. And being Trump is very pro-Alaska when it comes to oil development, and the other candidate has a track record of pretty much wanting to stick Alaska and just go be a pretty postcard, and that's it. Talk a little bit about those distinctions. Trump being the pro-oil person on the ballot.
One of the fortunate advantages we have in this election is we have two administrations who already have a track record. It's not like we're evaluating a candidate with a lot of hot air balloon promises against someone who's an incumbent with a record. We actually have two records. So you're absolutely correct. Trump did not just pursue energy dominance, which was really good for Alaska, and commit to opening ANWR. Now we've got the NPRA shut down, so he would reopen the NPRA. He would absolutely refill our emergency oil reserves, which Biden has drained. Trump also committed to and he actually did rebuild the strength of our military, which is so important up here in Alaska. We are on the front lines of defense for Russia. We see the encroachment right now of Russia and China in Alaska, where we are sending the military out to the Aleutian Islands again this week because we're having such strong military uptick here in Alaska. And I don't see Harris and Biden doing anything to preemptively beef up the military here in Alaska in order to present a strong defense. Instead, there's other emphases in the military, such as these endless wars that used to characterize America, and they increase our inflation, and they really put a serious burden on the working person to fund these endless wars that don't seem to really directly advantage America, while we see I would say an open war happening at our southern border as we have a direct invasion. What is it? Over the population of over 35 states has entered illegally at the southern border. And we are just letting that happen and not taking care of our domestic policy here. So President Trump actually did all of those things. We had record low illegal immigration under him. We had a stronger military. We had stronger energy dominance. And all of those things have absolutely hit rock bottom with the Harris and Biden administration that we've been under for 4 years. So I think that it's good for Alaska on a lot of levels. How do those things hit us? We know how the military hits us. We are all dependent on resource jobs, whether it's oil or gas or mining, when all of that right now has been absolutely shut down. We know that Senator Sullivan is really a key advocate for pointing out the over 60 direct executive orders and actions from the Harris and Biden administration targeting the shutdown of Alaska. There's not another state in this country that has direct White House orders shutting down that state, as you said, to turn us into a postcard and a tourist destination. But they have directly just targeted us as a state for shutdown. That's what they've done. That's not going to cease and desist if we roll into January and they're still in charge. I just noticed, humorously, one crane pop up over Anchorage in the last 4 years. I thought, oh, is that our infrastructure funding? No, it's over a church. So those are the people who get to build and develop in Anchorage. Other than that, there's not a single evidence of building and development happening here in the largest populated area in Alaska. And instead, what we have is shutdown happening from the bureaucrats in DC who know better than all of us about what to do with, I would say, the best resourced state in America. That's the difference between the two administrations and what we as Alaskans can expect.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Maripotola race. You touched on a little bit previously, but I think that this is such an important race too. Congresswoman Maripotola, I think, is voted 95% of the time with Democrats. She's caucuses with the Democrats. She is a Democrat. You know, I think a lot of Alaskans feel unheard, left out of the conversation, not followed up with. I have talked to countless and countless people that have put phone calls into Maripotola's office and haven't received a phone call, most of them being Republicans. And so we have a chance here to have somebody represent Alaska in Nick Begich, who will actually represent Alaska and actually care about all the people instead of just one segment. Do you think that this is a very important election, and why?
I know that this is an important election. There are 435 members of Congress, and all of them are up for election this year. This race has been identified as one of the top 10 races in Congress. They are saying that this is one of the toss-up seats. This one's up for grabs. And we have got such, whether it goes Democrat or Republican, such narrow majorities right now in Congress, in the House. And so the balance of power is really going to rest in these 10 toss-up seats. So whether this goes to Potola or Begich, it's going to determine not only the outcome and future of Alaska, but of the country. And that's why it's significant. I think it's interesting you say 95% of the time. I haven't dug into her specific vote by vote record. However, I can't think of a time that she went and sided with the Republicans at the expense of the party. There was even a time when she sponsored a pro-Alaska resource bill in committee, which she'll be able to say to Alaskans, and then refused to vote on it in committee, whether she was in support or against it. And then when it went to the floor, she actually sabotaged the bill by writing a letter, a dear colleague letter, to all of the Democrats saying, do not support this letter. So I'm confident Potola will campaign on, I did this, I sponsored this bill, which looks really good. She won't admit that she self-sabotaged the bill to hurt Alaskans. And so I wonder if those other 5% of the votes were actually the 40% of the votes she missed. You know, strategic votes, if you go back through on the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, on energy development in Alaska, votes like this one that she just conveniently skipped out on because she had to go to the bathroom, or she was up in Alaska doing campaigning or whatever it was. And so she didn't vote with the Democrats because she just wasn't on record voting, not representing Alaska's voice, not boldly and courageously taking a stand for her constituents, even if it doesn't align with her party, which is, you know, sometimes what Alaska representatives are going to have to do. And so I think it is really important for Alaskans, again, to vote this year, even if, you know, you would align typically with your party, in this case, Democrats, or if you're an independent who leans to the left. This is someone who's not representing us. It's important for us to remember when she started her office in DC, it was a respectable mix of Republican, moderates, and Democrats, which I even respected. I thought, you know, that at least represents what she campaigned on, and it reflects a composition of Alaskans. That was not her office much later. She put that in place. That was what was publicized and advertised. It did not take long for every single person who at all leaned to the right to get fired. And now her staff is almost completely DC insider, far left radicals that were given to her by the DC machine. There might be a couple of Alaskans, all Democrat. Don't be confused. Maripotola's office is far left Democrat, and that is not the state that we live in. Might be some really nice districts up by the squad members in New York, but it is not an Alaskan representative's office, but that's who's representing us. The staff in your office largely determine what the policy decisions are, and that would explain why Alaskans aren't being responded to.
Yeah, and I could just say from personal experience, I've reached out to her office, I don't know, at least a dozen times over the last 3 years. The first year while she was running and 2 years while she's elected. and emails, phone calls, you name it, and I've never gotten one response back. And that's just unfortunate to see that in a candidate, because especially for the Must Read Alaska show, we've had Democrats on. I have folks
Mhm.
on here that I don't agree with their opinions on. I treat them respectfully. And folks, if I reach out to them, they'll say yes or no. They want to come on the show. And her office has never responded once, not only to, asking on behalf of Must Read Alaska, but just John Quick, who's got a question because he lives in Alaska and he wants to contact his congresswoman. I've never gotten any response ever from her office. And I think that that's most people's experience that are Republicans in Alaska. I think that's a sad state to be in.
I don't know that it might be unique to Republicans. That might just be the
Yeah.
people you're talking to, but I don't think that it is the priority of a DC insider staff member to respond to constituents in Alaska. I don't know if many of the people viewing ever saw the series House of Cards. We were fascinated
I
watching it.
love that series.
I did too. We were fascinated watching it because it's not so much fiction. It is very factually accurate about what is happening behind scenes in DC. So if anyone wonders, how does the Beltway actually work? Well, there's this great special called House of Cards, and you can see what they actually say on camera. And there's a lot of panning to the audience to say, this is what I really think, or this is my intent. But one of the things you'll remember, John, that the main character who is gnashing and clawing his way to the top, which they're all doing, one of the things he would do is anytime he had to deal with a constituent issue in Georgia, that was the bane of his existence. He was not in DC to represent his constituents. He hated anytime a constituent issue actually pulled him off course, which was to climb the ladder in DC to get and amass as much power as he could in the Beltway. The people surrounding Peltola in her office are not interested in responding to constituents in Alaska. They are interested in making sure that this seat is held so that they can maintain a Democrat majority. That's what they're gaming for, making sure that Mary Peltola toes the line and isn't persuaded by constituents back here to turn on the speaker or the minority leader in this case. I'm sorry. And to make sure that they don't have her, remember the comment she made early on, I don't see why we can't do this like we do in the state legislature and create bipartisan factions. And she got lit up on social media for that. I think that that might be what Mary Peltola thinks or used to think. She is not allowed to think that anymore. She is absolutely controlled by the DC insiders. And I don't think that she has developed or at least demonstrated the courage and conviction to stand up to what's inside DC. I don't think that she had experience before that, knowing what she was walking into. And so we have what we have, and we get to decide whether we want to make a change or we want to just continue being represented by DC insiders.
Yeah, I think it's a clear distinction. I would encourage folks to really go out, just go vote. That's what I would encourage folks that are listening
I
here.
agree.
Just like Kelly alluded to earlier, we don't want to have a low turnout rate. We don't want to assume Trump's going to win anyways in Alaska. My vote
That's right.
doesn't count. It does count. You need to go vote. And I think, it's a very clear distinction between parties, right? You have Trump, you have Kamala Harris, you have Nick Begich, you have Mary Peltola. And I want to encourage folks to go out and vote for those in those elections. So question to you, Kelly, you have your own show, which I think is awesome. You have some really amazing guests on your show. Question to you is, what has been one of your favorite guests on your show so far and why?
That is really hard. I could talk for an hour about this. I'll start out by saying the one that was the most difficult to interview was Bill O'Reilly, because while the interview went really great, and we talked about the Salem witch trials because he just wrote a book on it and how that is the root of cancel culture today, which was fantastic to listen to him. He is such an experienced news broadcaster and interview person, like just TV person, that it was like walking into a Wimbledon tennis match and I didn't play tennis. That's what it felt like. So I'm used to interviewing a lot of people and public speaking a lot. I was not ready for that match, if you know what I mean. So the interview went great. And I think it's definitely worth listening to. And I learned a lot. I just didn't learn. I was just not ready for kind of the rapid fire exchange. So that one was really interesting. The other one that was interesting after the fact, I'd say, we interviewed Alan Dershowitz on his book. He wrote a book right after the start of the Hamas and Israel war that is continuing unbelievably to this day. I wanted to get him on right away because it was a current event. It's still a current event. And I think it's been nearly a year later. And so then that led into a invitation for him to come to Alaska. Nikki and I were in law school when he was a professor, and we learned a lot from him there. I knew he'd be fantastic. It turns out that the day we had scheduled for him to come speak in Alaska happened to be the day of the first debate between Trump and Biden. And so he spoke to Alaskans like minutes after the first debate had ended. And he gave this fantastic, it was sold out, packed crowd, just a fantastic Q&A between us and him. Then we opened it up to Q&A with the crowd, and it was brilliant. He covered every topic you can imagine. It was extremely interesting listening to him, right on the heels of listening to someone else who is younger than him, I'll put in quotes, debate President Trump, and see the intellectual difference between the two and the intellectual honesty that Dershowitz spoke with. I particularly loved having some personal conversation with him. He always challenges me in the way that I think. I don't agree with him on everything, but I love the intellectual sparring because it makes me sharper. It's like, I hadn't thought of that, but did you think of this? And then I also particularly loved that it was just a couple months later, just a couple weeks ago, that he left the Democrat Party and said, he's done. And I could see some of that twisting in his mind when he was here. And I asked him, why are you still a Democrat? And it really comes down to holding some of the same principles that a lot of the people, I would say nearly everybody watching your show agrees to. Traditional Democrats really believe in the Constitution and civil liberties and being suspicious of government and really being a champion of the people, essentially being populist. And so the things that we disagree on are, essentially very, very few. And I thought that's really interesting. I wonder how those things are all in tension right now with how the Democrat Party is choosing to make decisions. And he decided to leave the party this year. So I thought that was interesting after that discussion.
So for folks that have been living under a rock, where can they find your podcast? We'll put the links in the podcast description.
Thank you,
tell
John.
folks all those details.
Yep. So we are at standshow.org because we are helping to make courage contagious and helping people to take a stand. So standshow.org. We're on YouTube and social media. It's easy to find us. So Stand with Kelly and Nikki Tshibaka. I appreciate you promoting the show. We're about to have Nick Begich on again. Mary Peltola is welcome to come on the show. I think my experience is similar to yours. We don't get much response, but we, happy to profile different people. We don't just have political people. We've also had business leaders and authors and a really just interesting, diverse group of contributors to the show, which has made it really fun. So standshow.org.
And I think one of the cool things you've had on your show, not only have you had big names, which I think is awesome for Alaska because there's only a certain amount of people that can make a phone call and get these kind of big names on a show. So I think it's awesome that you have big names out there, but you also include your kids on some of these things. Talk to me about that.
Yeah.
You've had your kids on several of the podcasts, not only probably co-hosting or you're asking them questions, they're kind of giving their spiel. Why is that important to you?
I really have believed that my purpose is to champion others. That's where I find my greatest fulfillment, is helping other people succeed in their purpose or what they feel called to do. And if I can use my shoulders to lift other people up, that's really my dream. So we do that with the podcast. I do that with our consulting company, which is called Denali Strategies. I just love doing that. And so the podcast has really created a great opportunity for my two oldest kids to really help out and participate. They've learned so much and it has been incredible. So it started out with, do you want to draft questions? Do you want to contact some of these people? Do you want to meet them? Some of the backstage stuff. Do you want to try your hand in producing, like editing and putting these things together, which has really gotten the attention and has been really impressive to many of our guests. So I think that's great. It's actually inspired my oldest son to go into communications, which I don't think he was thinking about before. He happens to be very good at all of this. But then that actually moved into, you're actually pretty good at this. Do you want to try a show or two? And we geared some of the topics towards, youth in enterprise or youth raising up. And then that became, we got such positive feedback, especially on my oldest son. And he would do his own commentary and add his own thoughts. And then that became like the most popular episodes that we were like, well, we should just move you into essentially non-youth content and have you, he's very opinionated, and have you opine and give comment on some of these current event topics. And then those became very popular. And so we're just branching out that way. My daughter's actually put together several of the shows, several of the lineups, and those are her ideas. And so we're going to be bringing her into some of the shows now as well. I think it's just been a really great opportunity to use what we can to build other people. I love living by the principle, don't do alone what you can do with someone else. So the best way to help other people grow and learn is to bring them along. Do you have time for a story?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So this is all because of a time when I totally flubbed it up, John. Like one of my worst mistakes ever. I was invited. I was one of the first, probably the first chief data officer in the federal government. So I was running this massive, cutting edge, amazing data analytics program. And really, it was my team. I was just the person in charge of budgets and HR and all of that. So I have this really cool data analytics team. And because they were doing amazing things, finding healthcare fraud and theft, and returning billions of dollars to taxpayers, they were really, really good. I was invited to speak on all these panels and do all of these conferences and TV hits, and you get the idea. So I was the spokesperson for this team and all the great stuff they were doing. In this particular panel, there were 4 guys and me, and it was going to be televised and also put out on radio. And so the moderator said, whenever the gentlemen respond, they need to say, this is John speaking and this is my response. But Kelly, you don't need to say your name because you're the only woman at the table. And normally, like, I was used to being in boardrooms and these executive meetings where I'm the only woman at the table. And I don't think much about the gender difference or gender gap because it was so common. But this time it really offended me. Like, it got to me, and we're about to go live. And I was really heated because I was the only one at the table, but I wasn't the only woman in the room. There were these other young women in the room who came with these very self-important guys, and they were carrying their water bottles and carrying their briefcases and taking their social media pictures. You get the idea. Relegated to the viewer bench to watch how important these guys were. And I was so upset that I was the only woman at the table and all the other girls were sitting in these chairs taking social media pictures. The gender divide was just offensive. And so as the lights are coming on and the cameras are running and everybody has smiles, I'm sitting there like this angry feminist, right? And so I asked myself the question at that moment, but how did I get to the table? So I remember sitting in the chair, carrying the boss's briefcase, who was almost always a guy, and his water bottle and taking his picture. So how did I get to the table? And that's when I remembered almost all those bosses didn't bring me along because they needed me to carry their briefcase or their water bottle. Almost all of those male bosses brought me along because they were prepping me to get to the table. I was the one who had prepped them. I was the one who did all the research, knew all the talking points, got them ready, knew the material better than they did, but they had the position and the title, just like me. I had the cool data team. I didn't really know what they were doing, but it was my job to represent them. And so just like that, I learned, like, this is what to do. This is how to do it. Then they would bring me in the room under the guise that they needed someone to carry their briefcase when they didn't, so that I could see, this is the next step. This is what you say when you didn't prep it and you don't know the material and you read the talking points for 3 minutes in the cab on the way over. This is how you wing it at the table. And then they would then recommend and support me for the next promotion, for the next promotion, for the next promotion. That's how I got to the table. And so as the questions are starting going around the panel, I thought to myself, who did I bring today? Who's carrying my briefcase? Who's carrying my water bottle? I didn't bring anyone because I didn't need anybody to carry that stuff for me. I got it covered, right? I don't think highly of myself. And I missed this huge opportunity to not do alone what I could do with someone else. I swear I needed 4 people with me that day, right? I needed someone for my coat and someone for my briefcase and someone for my water. I could have snuck 4 people in that room to help get them to the table, but I missed it. So since that chastening moment, I've decided, don't do alone what you can do with someone else. If I can get my kids on the show, I'll get them on the show. Why? Because I have no idea if that's the next Bill O'Reilly sitting next to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, it's fun to see your show unfold. And for folks listening in, I'm going to put her show's links in the podcast description. I want to encourage folks to go listen to it. You're going to hear some awesome insights and thoughts and guests that Must Read Alaska doesn't have. They're 2 distinctive podcasts. And I think, Kelly, it's fun to see your show blossom and flourish and get popular out there, not only in Alaska, but probably around the lower 48. So I appreciate you giving us a peek behind the curtains there. 30 minutes has gone by in a flash here. Do you have any last minute thoughts here before we head off?
Yeah, I do. I think the other thing I would love to say is when we go and vote, which is so important to do, we must vote. We've got to vote yes on 2. So this is the ballot measure that will overthrow ranked choice voting. And there is a ton of money being spent right now to convince us again that this is something that it's not. Remember that the way that this got passed originally, I don't know anyone who actually voted, quote, for ranked choice voting. People voted for getting dark money out of the state, remember? But it was funded all by dark money. And just like this time, if you look at the top 3 contributors, it's contributor in Colorado, contributor in, is it California, and contributor in another out-of-state state. All this dark money is flooding in again to convince us that we are going to close all primaries to anyone who's not a registered Republican or Democrat. That is false. It's a lie. That never has happened, and it never will happen. The way that it works, and it's in the rules for both party, only a Democrat can't vote in a Republican election. Independents, undeclareds, everybody else can. Only a Republican can't vote in a Democrat election, which means you can't throw the vote, right? The Democrats can't flood the Republican ballot and put a Democrat forward, and vice versa. That's all that's happening. And so it's just an absolute bamboozlement. And then they're also saying that this is going to let all the dark money back in again. The dark money never left. And so we've got to vote yes on 2 to get rid of ranked choice voting. What ranked choice voting is doing, in case you missed it, we have a incarcerated violent felon in New York who never was an Alaskan, never will be an Alaskan, legitimately on the ballot for Congress this cycle. He could become our next Alaska U.S. congressman. And that is what ranked choice voting allows. That's this cycle. But wait, John, there's more. When I ran for Senate in 2022, we had a legitimate Hollywood actress move to Alaska, take on a fake Alaska identity and a fake Alaska address, and run for U.S. Senate, made it all the way through the primary. And you know what? Nobody knew. Do you know why? We don't have any parties vetting these people saying, hey, wait, that's a felon who doesn't live here. That can't get through the screening process. He's not a real Democrat. He's got to come off the ballot. Nor did anybody say, that's a Hollywood actress. That's not an Alaskan. She can't represent us, and screen that off before the voters had a chance to actually vote on who knows who. That's what ranked choice voting in this jungle primary is allowing, is any creature in the jungle can get on this ballot and bamboozle all of us, make it through to the general election like this year, and there goes your entire election. So we've got to clean this up and get back to a system that doesn't leave us vulnerable to being abused and exploited by dark money and any, what is it, Jack and Jane and Sally and Spot who want to run for a place on our ballot in Alaska.
Yeah, that's a great point, folks. Just if you just caught the tail end of this episode, I want to encourage you to go back and listen to the whole thing. Some very great insights from Kelly Tshibaka. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us again on the Must Read Alaska show. For folks that want to support Must Read Alaska, go to mustreadalaska.com. On the right-hand side, there's a little donate button. Every $5, $10, $100 helps keep the lights on here at Must Read Alaska. If you want to sponsor the show, email me, John, JOHN, at mustreadalaska.com. I hope everybody has a phenomenal rest of their week. Until next time, I'm John Quick from somewhere in Alaska. Thanks, Kelly.
Bye.